Hey everybody, welcome back to my channel. This is Shane with InShane Media. In this video, we're going to talk about Christmas, Bloody Christmas. Let's get into it. Christmas, Bloody Christmas is a 2022 Christmas horror film starring Riley Dandy, Sam Delick, and is directed by Joe Begos. So jumping right into this, guys, the characters in this movie were actually pretty great. And I don't mean just great for a movie like this. Like, I genuinely enjoyed the characters in this movie. And you don't really go into a movie like this usually expecting there to be great characters. In fact, I don't know about you guys, but when I hear about a movie that's basically about a Terminator killer Santa, which is what this is, that's all I'm there for. Like, that's all I need. Sign me up. Not expecting much of anything else. No overly great characters or any kind of complexity to the story. But they actually managed to pull both of those things off for the most part. In fact, a good portion of this movie in the beginning is spent getting to know our two main leads, Tori, played by Riley Dandy, and Robbie, played by Sam Delick. And they have such good chemistry and do such a good job with these characters that you're not even bored. You're not even upset that it hasn't gotten to the killer Santa portion yet. And honestly, with a movie like this, you have to walk a fine line or you can easily lose your audience because, like I said, the premise in and of itself is already kind of a silly one, but that's okay because that's what you come to this movie for. People are expecting to turn their brains off and just enjoy basically a slasher movie about Santa brutally killing people for 90 minutes or however long this movie is. And that's another thing, guys. This movie flowed nicely. Like, it was at a nice pace. It jumped in, gave you what you were looking for, and jumped out. But anyways, I digress. So if you are going to spend more time on your other characters than you are your villain, then you better make sure you do a good job because you risk losing your audience. But I think they do a fine job of not only giving us characters that we like, but really giving you somebody to root for. Like, midway into this movie, I really wanted this girl, Tori, to win. And that's another thing. They do not Mary Sue this chick at all. She really earns it in this movie and goes through one hell of a struggle and takes some serious damage. I won't spoil the movie, but if you've seen it, you know, and if you haven't seen it, you'll see when you do. Another thing, and maybe I just haven't seen Terminator in a while, and I could be completely wrong here, but aside from the movie clearly taking some inspiration from Terminator, I even feel like the score itself was an homage to the Terminator. So, if you ever wanted to know what Terminator would be like if it went full-blown horror, then you get it here. And it's done in the best way possible. Although, I would argue that the first Terminator already is pretty much a slasher movie, but this movie takes it there. I mean, it really goes there. Another thing I have to give this movie praise for is the entire aesthetic. I love the Christmas aesthetic in movies, especially horror movies, and it helps that a good portion of this movie is shot in the snow, and I love it. Something about that cold atmosphere adds an extra layer of eerie to any horror movie. And going along with that, then you get the entire 80s aesthetic that this movie has to offer. This film is certainly a love letter to 80s slasher movies. I mean, 80s in general, but definitely the slasher movies, right down to the horror references. Our two main leads are even horror fans themselves, and there's a scene in this movie where there's a fun little back and forth where they're discussing and arguing over horror movies, and they even start name dropping a few of the classics and even a couple of the deep cuts, if I remember correctly. So that was a fun little scene. This movie is also done almost entirely with practical effects. Like, if there was any CGI, my eyes didn't catch it, which is so awesome to me. I think most horror fans agree that practical effects are always the way to go. Practical over CGI every single time. Not only does it look better, but you don't date a movie or put a timestamp on it when you use practical. And yeah, not every practical effect in this movie or most movies looks great all the time, but it honestly adds a lot of charm to the movie, and this movie is no exception. And going along with the practical effects is also the stunt work. There's a lot of physical acting in this movie. Like the stunt actors and even probably the actual actors look like they put a lot into this movie physically, especially into the third act. They definitely wanted to dive into the action side of the 80s. Really, I mean, they were paying even a little homage to like 80s action movies, like I said, especially The Terminator in the third act of this movie. And it gave it more of that Terminator esque feel. This movie is just a complete love letter, like I said, to a generation of movies that me and a lot of other people love so much. And honestly, I don't even really have any cons for this movie. I mean, it's not a perfect movie, but it didn't try to be. It knew what kind of movie it was. It mostly stayed in its lane, and the things that it did shoot for, I'd say it pretty much stuck the landing on all of it. This honestly probably just became one of my favorite holiday horror movies. I mean, Black Christmas is always going to be my favorite Christmas horror movie, and Halloween's going to be my favorite horror movie of all time, but this definitely goes in easily the top 10 and maybe even the top 5. I'm giving this movie a solid 9, guys. I don't see it getting any worse with rewatches. In fact, that's another thing. This movie does have rewatch value. Like, I already want to watch it again. So, if you're a horror fan, a Terminator fan, or even just an 80s movie fan, I recommend you check this out. Anyways, that's it for this one. Go ahead and like and share this video, and if you haven't already, please subscribe, and I'll catch you guys in the next one.